A boy born in steel and fire. Lucas never had a childhood. While other boys played in sunlit fields, he grew up in the cold belly of a warship, surrounded by the scent of oil and salt, the constant hum of engines, and the distant roar of jet fighters launching into the unknown. He had never stepped on the solid ground for more than a few weeks at a time. The USS Independence was his home, its corridors, his playground, its crew, his family. But family didn't mean love. His father, Lieutenant Daniel Harper, was a hardened Navy officer, a man who believed in discipline, not affection. His words were sharp, his hands rough. Lucas had learned never to cry, never to show weakness. You either stand or you fall, and I won't have a son who falls. Lucas took the lesson to heart. Then at 11 years old, he lost his leg. It was a freak accident, a malfunction in the ship's landing gear. One moment he was standing near the flight deck, watching the fighter jets land. The next, a jagged piece of steel sliced through his leg like paper. The pain was unbearable. He woke up in the infirmary days later, his world spinning. His father was there, standing over him, not with comfort, but with something heavy in his hands. A metal prosthetic, cold, unforgiving. "Stand up," Lucas did, even when it hurt, even when the phantom pain made him want to scream, because falling wasn't an option. The sky shatters. The day started like any other. Lucas sat on the deck, tightening the straps on his prosthetic leg, watching the horizon. Then the sky broke. A deep, unnatural hum filled the air, a vibration so low and powerful that it made his bones ache. The clouds twisted unnaturally, as if something was pushing through them from the other side. Then they appeared. Massive, black ships, blotting out the sun, their surfaces shifting like living shadows. They weren't like anything human. They weren't meant to be. The first shot wasn't fired at them, it was fired at the mainland. Lucas barely had time to register the explosion before the city vanished. 1 second, it was there. Skyscrapers, streets, homes. The next, it was dust. The fleet scrambled, anti-aircraft guns lighting up the sky. But it was futile. Lucas saw the USS Montana take a direct hit, one shot, and the massive battleship was torn in half. Then the first aliens landed. Nightmares made flesh. They weren't ships, they were creatures. Towering, twisted things with hollow black eyes and too many joints. Their skin pulsed as if something moved beneath it. And then they started killing. Lucas couldn't move. He saw a Marine lift his rifle before an alien's claw punched through his chest. Another soldier screamed as a massive limb crushed his skull like wet paper. For the first time in his life, Lucas was afraid. Then a body hit the ground next to him. A gun. His hands moved before his brain did. The rifle was still warm from the Marine who had held it. Lucas grabbed it, turned, and fired. The bullet slammed into the nearest creature. It screeched, but it didn't die. It turned toward him and charged. Part 4. First Blood. Lucas had never killed before, but in that moment there was no choice. His finger pulled the trigger until there was nothing left. The alien staggered, its chest shredded by bullets. But it didn't fall. It lunged. Lucas barely dodged, rolling across the deck, his metal legs screeching against the steel. His hands were shaking. His breath was too loud. The creature loomed over him, mouth splitting open into something wrong. Then, boom! The alien's head snapped backward, exploding into black mist. Lucas gasped, turning. His father stood there, shotgun in hand, face covered in blood. For a second, their eyes met. Then an explosion ripped through the ship, sending them both flying. Lost and hunted, Lucas woke up alone. The air was thick with smoke, choking, suffocating. The ship was dying, groaning like a wounded beast as metal warped and bent under the stress of the ongoing battle. Fires raged across the deck, casting long, flickering shadows. Bodies. So many bodies. Lucas tried to push himself up, his metal legs sparking against the floor. Pain shot through his ribs. He was injured, but alive. The same couldn't be said for the men around him. He saw Commander Reynolds, the man who had taught him how to aim a rifle. His body twisted, eyes wide open, but seeing nothing. He saw Private Diaz, the Marine who had once snuck him candy when the rations were low, his face half missing, burned away by something unnatural. Lucas wanted to scream, but then he heard it, a sound that made his blood freeze, a wet, dragging noise. Something crawled through the wreckage. Lucas held his breath. The thing wasn't dead. It was the same alien he had shot before, the one that had nearly killed him. Its head was half missing, a mess of black ichor and shattered bone. But it was still alive, and it was looking for him. Lucas forced himself to move. He crawled across the deck, trying to stay quiet, his heart beat a war drum in his ears. The alien sniffed the air, its black eyes scanning the debris. Lucas grabbed a broken metal pipe, his only weapon. He knew he wouldn't win in a fight. His body was weak, his vision swam. The alien turned. It had found him. Lucas braced for death. Then, boom! A pulse of blue energy slammed into the alien, sending it flying across the deck. Lucas gasped, turning, his mind struggling to understand what had just happened. And then he saw it, a second alien. But this one was different. The enemy of my enemy. The alien was armored, sleek, controlled. It wasn't like the savage creature tearing through the fleet. Its eyes, pale silver, intelligent, studied him with an unreadable expression. And then it spoke. "Human, if you want to live, come with me." Lucas's mind reeled. This had to be a trick, but the alien had saved him, and the ship was falling apart. He had no choice. Lucas took a deep breath. "Fine, but if you try anything, I'll kill you." The alien tilted its head, amused. "You can try." They ran. Lucas limped as fast as his damaged body could take him, his metal legs screeching with every step. The alien moved like a phantom, dodging debris with ease, firing at anything that moved. They passed through what remained of the armory. Lucas grabbed a fresh rifle. If he was going to trust this alien, he wouldn't do it unarmed. "Who the hell are you?" Lucas asked between breaths. The alien didn't look at him. A mistake in their system, an outlier, a soldier who thinks for himself. "Great. So I'm stuck with an alien rebel? And I'm stuck with a crippled child. Fate is cruel." Lucas almost shot him, but there was no time. A massive explosion tore through the corridor, and the ceiling collapsed behind them. They had one way forward. The last stand. Lucas never expected to step onto an enemy warship, yet here he was, standing in the belly of the beast. The alien ship was a cathedral of death, vast and eerily silent. The walls pulsed like a living thing. Strange symbols glowed, shifting and twisting in patterns Lucas couldn't understand. And at the center, a console. "That," the alien said, pointing, "that is their link to the fleet." "You mean their command center?" Lucas asked. "Numbers, I mean their brain." Lucas felt sick. This entire ship is alive? The alien didn't answer. Lucas swallowed. His father was gone. His crew was gone. And he had one shot to end this. But the moment he stepped toward the console, the doors behind them slammed open. The enemy had found them. Lucas turned, raising his rifle. The alien beside him drew its blade. And then they fought. Lucas fired, dodged, moved like he never had before. His body screamed in protest, his metal leg barely keeping up. An alien grabbed him. Lucas twisted, slamming his elbow into its throat. Another charged. Lucas ducked under its claws, firing point blank into its chest. Beside him, the rogue alien moved like a demon, cutting down his former brothers without hesitation. The air was thick with blood and smoke. And then, through the chaos, Lucas saw it. The enemy commander, watching from the console, waiting. Lucas raised his gun. The commander smirked. "You were meant to kneel, human." Lucas smiled through bloody teeth. "Yeah, well, we don't kneel." And he hit the button. The boy who survived the explosion tore the sky apart. Lucas barely made it out. He ran, through fire, through collapsing corridors, through the dying screams of an entire species. He threw himself onto the last escape pod. The alien was right behind him. They launched just as the mothership imploded, sending shockwaves through space. The enemy fleet faltered, and then they ran. Lucas collapsed against the pod's wall, blood dripping from his face. His vision swam, but he forced himself to stay awake. The alien sat across from him, silent. After a long moment, Lucas laughed. "Well, that was fun," the alien huffed. "You are insane." "Yeah," Lucas grinned, "but I survived." And for the first time in his life, he felt alive. Epilogue. The Legend of Lucas. The war wasn't over, but it had changed. The world would hear of him, the crippled boy who refused to kneel, the orphan soldier who killed an empire. Lucas stood on the ruined deck of the USS Independence, staring at the rising sun. He wasn't a child anymore. He was a warrior, and when the aliens returned, he would be waiting. The storm on the horizon. The war was over, for now. Lucas stood on the damaged deck of the USS Independence, staring out at the vast open sea. The ocean stretched endlessly, waves crashing against the battered hull of the last surviving warship. Above, the sky was clear, a sharp contrast to the chaos that had unfolded mere hours ago. But Lucas knew better. The silence after a storm was never peace. It was the promise of something worse. Behind him, the survivors were gathering. Men and women who had fought, who had bled, who had lost everything. Their uniforms were torn, their bodies broken, but they were still standing. Among them stood the alien who had fought beside him. They hadn't spoken since the battle. Not really. Now the alien turned to Lucas, silver eyes reflecting the ruined remains of the fleet. "They will return?" Lucas already knew that. "I'm counting on it." The alien studied him for a moment and then let out a low hum, something between a laugh and a sigh. "Your people are reckless. We prefer determined." The alien tilted its head. Number reckless. Lucas smirked. His body was screaming in pain, his vision blurred with exhaustion. But there was something else, something deeper. He wasn't afraid anymore. "You never told me your name." "You never asked." Lucas shook his head, chuckling. "All right, I'm asking now." The alien was silent for a moment before finally answering. "Kareth." Lucas nodded. "All right, Kareth. What happens now?" The alien turned his gaze toward the horizon, where the sky darkened again. "Now we prepare." The signal in the dark. The battle was over, but far, far away. Beyond the known edges of the universe, something stirred, a deep, ancient intelligence, a mind vast enough to swallow stars, old enough to have watched entire civilizations rise and fall. It had felt the disturbance. The loss of one fleet was meaningless, but the failure, the resistance of an inferior species, that was unacceptable. A new directive was issued, a single signal, broadcast across the vast, empty void of space. It was a message, a warning, a summon, and across countless systems, the darkness responded. The final choice. Lucas didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of the broken warship, watching the stars flicker like distant embers. A storm was coming, not tomorrow, maybe not even in a year, but he could feel it. They weren't done. They would never be done. He had a choice. He could walk away, find a quiet corner of the world, and pretend none of this had ever happened. He could let someone else fight the next battle, but that wasn't who he was. Lucas looked down at his scarred hands, at the metal leg that had carried him through fire and death. He was still standing, and if they thought humanity would kneel, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Lucas turned to Kareth. "We need ships, we need weapons, and we need a plan." Kareth studied him, then gave the smallest of nods. "Then let's begin." Somewhere in the depths of space, the enemy was coming. But when they arrived, they wouldn't find a broken world waiting. They'd find a war. They'd find Lucas. And this time, humanity wouldn't be fighting to survive. They'd be fighting to win.